My name is Erik Hernandez. I went to ASU and graduated in 2007 with a bachelor's in science of industrial design. I've always been interested in art and just trying to find a way to improve the product around us. I was always a big fan of Legos and building and coming up with my own ideas and trying to figure out ways to be creative and looking at ways to utilize that outside of just fine arts and, as I mentioned, improving the things around us was something that was a difficult task to figure out before really falling into what industrial design was. Before that, I had looked at architecture, I had looked at engineering, and both of them had a path that wasn't exactly what I was looking for, and it just kind of came upon industrial design while really looking at who makes shoes. And I'd always loved shoes, skateboarding. I'd gone through shoes and worn shoes out very quickly, so it was just like, how do I make these better? Who does this? How do I find a way to do this? And so through research and just asking questions and even going to what was Academy of Art College for a session while I was in high school, it opened my eyes up to what product design was. And even then, it was still transportation design and getting recommendations to find something else called product or industrial design. So with that, I found the program and saw that ASU had one, and being my home, it was the easiest and best way to really find out if that's what I wanted to do. And once I was in, I was hooked.
That's great. That's awesome. So then about now, tell us about where you work right now and what you do at the company where you work.
I currently am a design director for basketball at Adidas in the North American office. I've been here for 3 years now. I have worked on the lifestyle side as well in Originals for 2 years of that time, and have been in footwear for 10 years now.
Can you tell us about something you've designed? And if you could sort of walk us through your process of design, that'd be great.
Yeah. So this project I have in front of me is called the Adidas Originals SL Loop Runner. And this was a product from our fall/winter 2014 line. So this means that I started working on this in late 2012, moving into 2013. So this was one of my first bigger projects with Adidas Originals, and was fairly successful. I think overall it's closing in on about 1 million pairs in the United States and North America as a whole. So for this business unit in North America, it was a fairly successful project. Working on this project, there was a lot of questions as to where we were in the market and what our transition was and what we needed to be as Adidas Originals in the US. And so there was questions of what the competitor was doing, what we needed to do, how we would respond and react, or actually make our own mark and tread our own path. And so some of the visuals that you see are drastically different in terms of the aesthetics and the design language that's used compared to what we were doing in previous seasons. So it was kind of a departure that was uncomfortable to a lot of people internally, but it was something that we were proposing and really willing to double down on, not just on this project, but with the product line at the time. And so looking at this project, it's a casual runner, not made for performance, just something lifestyle, wearable on a daily basis. So a lot of the restrictions and performance needs didn't need to be as heavily acknowledged, and it was more just how do you make it comfortable, lightweight, and something easy to get on, get off that can be worn with a lot of different outfits. And so some of the details that we looked at while we were designing the shoe had to do with what we call collective memory. So with Adidas being 50 plus years old as a company, we have a lot of heritage and a lot of background and DNA through sport. And so even doing a lifestyle shoe, we will want to always honor and respect what we've done in the past. And so a lot of those things were identified and really looked at on this model. So some of the models that inspired this product were the SL72, which was one of the first podium shoes ever done for the 72 Olympics. And so I can pass on some photos of that as well, so you can have those for reference. And there's cues from several other shoes, but a lot of it is not necessarily taking an old shoe and making it new and modern. Some of the things that you've seen in retro bringbacks, like the new Beetle and things that have come in the past, but actually just taking some of those ideas and evolving them into something new. So something that's come up in a lot of shoes, even our current performance shoes, is this idea of what we consider a decelerator. So this facet that carves in on the midsole that's really drastic in a visual actually helps improve cushioning with something like this. So when you actually heel strike, this allows it to compress and give a little bit more mechanical cushioning beyond what the foam allows. And that's something that's been shown on performance shoes as well as casual shoes, but it started way back in the 70s for us. So something we've continuously evolved on the performance side, being referenced and actually drastically pushed in a visual for the lifestyle side. And then just happy occurrence is that when somebody wears this as a lifestyle shoe, it actually gives you a place to kick off your shoes pretty easily, where you put your other foot here and kind of allow it to kick off. So, play on both sides and have something that actually creates such a strong visual for the shoe, be performance as well as function. Some of the other things, and referencing the name, the loop name actually came and was derived from the way that the stripes were created. So looking at what we typically do on stitched on stripes, the 3 stripes that you see from our heritage, from Superstars and all our past models, looking at how to create something that's a new visual but also helps improve what this shoe does, is we looked at the stripes, and instead of stitching them on, we made it look as though they've been cut up and peeled off and create loops to help with the lacing. But in doing so, we've created these windows that are void of the stripes that we've inserted mesh in that gives the shoe breathability. So again, something that may be a little bit less breathable but more durable throughout the rest of the shoe allows mid-foot breathability. And so
it's interesting. I was just going to say, what is really amazing is, this peel and off. To me, it also looks like almost as if you are opening a window into history. Then it's unpeeling the present to show the past heritage of Adidas, which is, I don't know, kind of a really incredible visual.
Yeah, and so with that idea of the loops and how we continue to evolve that, obviously being a booty construction or a sock-like construction, it keeps typical tongue construction out, so something that makes it easier to get in actually improves the fit. So now we've created a sock so that when you slip it on, there's no slipping, there's no heel slip. You can wear it very loosely laced, but in doing so, we also wanted to create those loop visuals to create the accessibility and really kind of double down on the idea of what the loop visual is. And so when you look at the shoe as a whole, there isn't a ton that says this is the SL72 or the Formula One or any of those shoes that we referenced from the past. But if you start to think of it as, again, that collective memory, it's somebody that would know the past, appreciates what's coming in the new. But if you're not somebody that knew the past, it gives you a reason to look back at the past and understand why we took those details and what makes Adidas so strong in its heritage. And so some other details that are a little bit more subtle are even just looking at this, what looks like almost a tessellation on the tongue, is something that was a molded tongue. One of the first times that a molded tongue was done was on the SL72. And we took that pattern, and instead of doing something heavy and bulky like that original tongue, is use new technologies and new manufacturing processes to create this 3D printed process and use it the same way so that it gives the tongue structure, but there's still flexibility and there's still that detail harkening to the past. As well as just something as simple as this T-toe construction. It gives you structure around the toe so that it's reinforced, and gives a little bit of structure here so that the toe that's pretty much deconstructed as a whole still has some structure and keeps itself up off your toes so you don't feel any pressure. So, something that Adidas has done very well throughout its history is keep patterns simple. And so when you look at this shoe, there's minimal amount of patterns compared to what was happening in the 90s and even the early 2000s. And while we still want to honor and not go so far as to no-sew, PU films, hot melted, very plastic feeling shoes, we wanted to honor that this is still a lifestyle shoe. We want to make sure that somebody can appreciate the fact that there's still suedes on it, that there's still nylons, that there's materials like open meshes that harken back to the past, but also respect the fact that this is a lifestyle product versus something that's made for competition.
So the next question is about aesthetics. I think you've already talked about aesthetics in some way, but in general, would you talk about your process? How do you go about designing a shoe, and how do you think of aesthetics, but also functionality? I mean, it's amazing how just in terms of that cutout on the sole, how you explain how it functions, but also has a sort of an interesting aesthetic appeal, and it can be used to take your shoe off. So the combination of aesthetics and functionality, so beauty and utility, and then I know you've talked about zero waste and the things that Adidas is doing now to go towards that sustainable direction. If you could talk about those things and your process, that'd be great.
So with this project, we were working on a 12-month timeline. So that goes from original brief coming from product marketing all the way to production and retail. So within 12 months, we have a few rounds of samples. With our capabilities in the Portland office, we have a sample room that can run full upper pullovers and 3D prints of the outsoles and toolings. So we are pretty capable of getting something done in our home office before ever sending anything out to Asia. So it's very convenient. It's something that allows you to not have to go through multiple rounds of sketches. You can actually get to physical, tangible product pretty quickly. And so something that Adidas is pushing is this idea of being makers or creators. So really being the one to go hands-on. So not only sending over a shell pattern or something of a tech drawing to a pattern maker or a 3D modeler, but to really go there and start looking at hand building something, stitching it yourself, cutting pieces out to see how those details work. So a specific thing about this aesthetic is the flipped up, peeled, looped stripes. And so something that we had to figure out was, would these pass pull strength tests to make sure that you could lace through them? So going through and going to the sample room and really starting to cut out that panel, see what we can do to reinforce it, to back it, to allow the breathability that we wanted, but to keep the strength and utility that's needed to have a lace go through it was a key detail. So something that we did was, this is a piece of synthetic suede, and in order to make it stronger, we backed it with a PU film. So it reinforces it and also gives that secondary color. So if you were to peel this stripe back over, you can see that the suede is there and that it was literally just a stamped die cut piece that's been wrapped up. In terms of other aesthetics for this model, we did go for something a little bit more drastic than normal in this very angled, faceted look versus what we do in the line and what a lot of our history shows. But if you really start to dive deep down into our past and our heritage, our archives show that we've had this faceted angular visual before a Lamborghini or some more recent architecture is shown. And it's always fun to see something that was done 30, 40 years ago coming back and being reinterpreted and not having to say, here's the shoe again. We could always do that. We do that with some of our classics that'll always be around, Stan Smiths, Superstars, Campuses. They're our heritage and we'll always honor it. But it doesn't mean that we can't honor them in a different way and elevate them to something new. So the Formula One shoe, which I can pass images on, you can reference those, are actually a great example of where a lot of this faceted angular visual comes from. And so some other details of kind of making sure that design allows for utility is actually this visual at the bottom. So cutting out the rubber and allowing this EVA to show through from the midsole not only reduces weight because the rubber is a heavier material and we can get rid of some of the EVA as well, there's this idea of the trampolining effect that happens. So when you press down and your heel hits your foot, it actually allows this to splay a little bit more, which allows kind of this compression that splays out and rebounds as you lift your foot back up. So not only is it a nice distinct visual, it gives you some function as well. And again, being that this is on the lifestyle side and not having a lot of the technological advances like new foams or different materials, we have to find ways to use our manufacturing and our design details to really give us those improvements beyond the norm.
That's fantastic. Wow, I mean, it's amazing how form and function fit well together in some of these details.
Definitely. Yeah, and so that's everything that we try and do, has to be inherently functional. So even though it is a lifestyle shoe, as I mentioned previously, this is a sock-like construction. So for somebody that has a wider foot or a higher instep or just doesn't like the compression, it may be hard for somebody to get into this. So again, making sure that we have these pulls, but also then breaking the pattern. So this may be non-stretch materials to make sure you don't splay out or roll over the shoe. You can see the stitch here actually continues under these eye rows and allows for a stretchable material package to be put on the tongue so that somebody with a higher instep or a wider foot can either stretch out this way or allow it to stretch out this way to allow for more comfort and accessibility. So keeping your foot snug and making sure that it's not overly stretchy, but also making sure that you can get your foot in no matter what your foot shape is.
So aesthetically, your inspirations come from a variety of sources. Right? When you've talked about architecture, you've talked about Adidas heritage, so products, architecture, fashion as well.
Yes, of course. And I think, again, being on the lifestyle side, we have a lot more room to play in fashion. So looking at designers that we even collaborate with, like a Raf Simons or Rick Owens, some of the highest couture lines available and seen on Paris Fashion Week, you actually see some of our product at high-end tiers that we collaborate at $600, $700 price points come down and inspire some of this. And so we're working linearly on those things, and at the same time, in tandem, we want to make sure that accessibility and somebody that sees that for the first time that may think that is too far and too drastic can also say, oh, but this is really nice and this feels great. And to the average consumer, this may be pushy. So we have to make sure that we have that bandwidth from something of high-end fashion all the way to the average consumer that may be going to a mall to find a shoe at $75.
Okay. Oh, I know that Adidas is doing some stuff with zero waste and thinking of sustainability and new technologies that will minimize waste. Can you talk about those efforts a little bit as well?
Definitely. As we start pushing to advancing how production is done and what other concepts there are and what possibilities there are, we continue to look at new processes. And so something on our more innovative side and being looked at by our advanced teams is 3D printing for midsoles. And that's started to come out from a lot of different groups and companies, but we've really pushed to make sure that is not just 3D printing for the capability of additive process, but also the innovation of tuning specifically for the consumer. So if the possibility were to have 3D scanning machinery in a store, in a retail facility, to be able to scan someone's foot, ask them how they run or watch them run, and actually fine-tune a midsole to say that they pronate or they have a step that does this, we can actually help them improve the way they run. And so with that, it's additive. There's no molds, no shipping or delivery from China or Vietnam. It really simplifies the process and actually brings the production time from months to minutes in a lot of cases. The same with uppers. We've been using our PrimeNet technology for now a few years, and our advancements in that are pushing more and more to be able to knit with zero waste. So if you need a pattern that is shaped like this, comes around here, cuts here, we can say that's all we need. Currently, of course, when you purchase materials from a vendor or a supplier, they're going on 44-inch rolls, yards and yards of material, and the best you can do is look at yields. And so again, something that was done on this shoe at a lower price point where innovation isn't as possible, we looked at things as simple as making sure that this pattern piece can actually nest into itself. So making sure that when you have a piece of material that's a square or even a cowhide shape, very odd patterns, that we can try and place these parts in the best manner possible to make sure that our sustainability is as best as we can for something at this level. Something that we look at across all models is avoiding things like solvent-based glues. We go to water-based for production. We make sure that everything is as eco-friendly as possible, and we've successfully done so. We're one of the top companies in terms of athletic wear when it comes to sustainability, and one of the top 10 from the last report in just production in general, not just athletic, but in manufacturing. So we pride ourselves on that, and we do so not just from product, but from the way we work, whether it's trying to do more digitally than printing out things, passing things on from factories, making sure that 3D prints are used before opening molds. A little goes a long way when you start to realize how many samples we go through, how many rounds we go through. It's amazing to see and unfortunate to see how much we still waste, but in comparison to the next best company, we still thrive to make sure that we do the best we can.
So it's amazing. So not only are some of these new technologies helping you make more sustainable shoes, but also shoes that are customized to the user's needs. And one of the things that's talked about in sustainability is the idea that if something is designed specifically for you, you will keep it longer, you will use it more carefully. So therefore the life of the product is also extended, and that also adds another layer of sustainability. So in a sense, you're doing both.
Definitely. We talk about bespoke and tailoring, and going back to what shoes were, cobbling. We use the term cobbling a lot. We mock up stuff in the same way that a cobbler would. We're getting back to that nitty and gritty and using our hands, and it's exciting. Not everyone has the time to do 50 iterations of sketches, but if you can go and you can get a piece of leather or a piece of textile and try and build something and get your point across that much quicker, it makes the process that much easier. And so, even working with different people on the business side, on the development side, there's only so far that a sketch and even a nice rendering or a 3D model can get you, but being able to tangibly show something to somebody can get sign off much quicker. And so, from that side, it makes our process that much more efficient. And on the other side, when it comes to the consumer, being able to tell that something has a handmade touch to it, even in mass production, you can tell that it's been considered in a different manner, that it's not just something that was built in Illustrator or Photoshop and then mass produced, that somebody took the consideration to think this cut or this seam makes more sense than this, and that's how we move forward.
So in a sense, it also brings the element of craft into mass production, which is sort of a new trend, and also something that brings more value to the product.
Definitely. One of the terms that started to come outward facing in our marketing is this idea of future craft. And so taking modern day processes like 3D printing and even CNC milling and finding ways to honor it through craft. Adi Dassler, the founder of Adidas, was a cobbler. He was all about the athlete. He went to each athlete and asked them what they needed and was on his hands and knees working on the person's foot. Jesse Owens was a big one, going during the Olympics to go put the shoes on Jesse Owens to make sure they fit well before winning 4 gold medals in front of Hitler. Very, very intense situation being a German company and having to do that. But it shows the amount of dedication that the brand has always had to craft. And so this idea of future craft, and again, looking at what CNC mills can do. Right now we use it to mill our molds, but we've actually started to look at it, if we want to use leather again, something that is realistically sustainable when it's done in the right manner because it's a byproduct of meat. It's an easy one to come across. We looked at, instead of cutting and piecing together leather, what if we used one piece of leather and milled it to do what we need? So if it needs to be more flexible or more pliable in these areas, how do you create a pattern that a CNC mill can do? And therefore, again, creating a shoe out of almost one process where everything's done in one piece and all you need to do is stitch one stitch down the back to be able to create a finished product.
Great, what a fantastic idea. Yeah, wonderful. All right, so one last question, and this is more actually not so much about your work or Adidas, but more as you know, this is for students who are just kind of getting to the course is called Understanding Design. Like, what exactly is design? So, what would you recommend to someone who's like just kind of thinking of a career and is considering design, wants to be a designer? What would you suggest or recommend to someone like that?
Be willing to screw up. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, every project I've ever worked on, being a perfectionist, being a designer, you're so critical of yourself, and you know you can always do something better. When you get into school, you know that there's a deadline, and that's when you need to get it done. And you'll be in class and you'll see people that will not allow that to happen and won't turn something in and will ask for extensions. And in the end, everybody can continue to make things better. That's why there's new iterations of shoes, of technology, of iPhones. Everything has a new and improved version every year, every season. But that doesn't mean that you can't give your best for this, and that doesn't mean that you can't fail while doing so. In creating this model, you start to see why I did something, but then on the next version, you see why I did it differently. Simplifying even further, improving upon fit, finish, even costing exercises. You know, I'm working with business people, I'm working with development people, I'm working with engineers, and things that we had to compromise on here. For the next season, we learned and understood how to make it better. So this might have cost us too much, and we took a hit on our margins, and we didn't make as much money as we needed to. But maybe for me, I succeeded because I pushed the business side to say, even though this costs more, it's making it look better. Well, then that gives me the next season to then say, okay, they're going to hold me to that new cost. What do I need to do differently to make it look as good as I want? Well, retaining my vision, but also check the boxes that I may have pushed them beyond comfort on the next time. And so failure and the knowledge that you're going to improve every time is a big one.
So would you say failure, almost in a sense, failure is a part of success?
It is. It's definitely that. And, you know, you can say that comes in quotes all the time, but it's true. And it's something that is very, very easily proven. You know, whether it's Michael Jordan admitting that he lost just as many games as he won, missed as many shots as he's made, it's part of the life process, not just design, but just knowing that you're going to fail beyond designing. You might not even become a designer. You may go through 4 years of design to then become a product manager or a product marketer and work with designers. It doesn't mean that you know better than them. It's just that each person has their role and excels at a certain thing and becomes an expert in that part. And as a designer, you have to be an expert in what's desirable, what's functioning, how does form inherently follow function, and vice versa. You can't be stuck to this is a rule and this is a guideline. You have to be flexible to know that if I try this because it functions but it doesn't look good, I may have to make it look better, and the function may be affected by that. But in the end, you're working towards a goal to satisfy a lot of different things and not just design intent. And that's a big one, is the flexibility to know that in the end, whether it's a consumer, whether it's a retailer, whether it's your boss, you have to satisfy somebody at one point or another. And there's always a point of battling for what you believe is right. And then there's a point where you have to acknowledge that there's certain things that you'll always improve on for the next time. And so keeping those ideas and not feeling like it's a failure that you didn't get your point across, but that it means that you have another season, another round, another product to push that towards, is always kind of that positive outlook